Hey everyone, happy Thursday. This is Jamie Russo. I am the moderator of the group and the host of the Everything Coworking podcast. So I wanted to jump in. Speaking of podcast, I have an episode coming up on compensating community managers, but I saw this discussion pop up in the discussion group and thought I would address it. And this is a super common topic. So I run a couple of programs. I run the Coworking Startup School to help people start profitable co-working spaces that they love to run. And as folks are getting close to launch, this is a very common question that comes up. How do I hire a community manager? How do I compensate a community manager? And then we don't talk about it in this group, but I also run Community Manager University. So I work closely with community managers of co-working spaces around the world. And I want to talk about a couple of considerations around community manager compensation. So first, let me tell you a quick story. So I have the most amazing community manager. She is such a good fit for this role. And so I'll try to kind of keep my thoughts cohesive here. But story first is Kristen started last summer, and we do a bonus that's based on profit and controllable expenses. So she did a great job as she was onboarding, added a lot of new members. She's very compelling, gives a great tour, great follow-up, very consistent. She does all the things that are part of the process of nurturing leads that come in, managing leads, onboarding members, and retaining members, right? So this is another thing that came up in my flight group program recently that I talked about on a recent podcast is it is so much easier to retain members than to get new members. So anyway, Kristen's doing a great job on both fronts. And so at the end of the quarter, I said, hey, Kristen, we didn't talk about this, but we do a bonus. I'd forgotten to mention it in her onboarding process. We do a bonus based on, these factors, and you're going to have an extra, X amount in your paycheck. And she just kind of looked at me and she said, well, thank you. I don't think that's necessary. I'm just doing my job, but thank you. And, I'm sure she appreciated it, but she literally was just like, well, I wouldn't have expected that. And I'm just doing the things that I'm supposed to do. And I think that this is probably a little bit of a common reaction for folks in this role because of the profile that we tend to hire for this role. So we think about community managers, and I actually just released a training for the senior community manager level in Coworking Manager University about understanding behavioral profiles in our team and how we can use those profiles to better understand each other. So I've gotten fairly interested in how to use profiles for these reasons because humans are so unique and we're all so unique. So I love to have the teams that I work on do these profile assessments and use them to understand how to better work with each other. So the reason I bring this up is because I do think that there's a profile that's somewhat typical for someone who's a very good fit for the community manager role. Now, the community manager role can certainly vary depending on the type of space, how many locations a brand has, how they staff, etc. But typically a community manager is wearing a number of hats, right? So they have a sales and marketing hat, they have an operations hat, they have a community management hat, they may have a leadership hat within the space among their team. So let's talk about, so we have to hire for that package, not just a specialty. So while attracting new members is super important to us, we can't really entirely let that live with the community manager, right? Generally their role is to nurture leads that come in through the website that an owner is managing or a head of marketing is managing or a Google My Business listing or maybe events that they're hosting, but they're managing leads that have come through a system that has been set up for them, and they may be in charge of supporting that system. They may be answering live chat, they're giving tours when the tours come in, they're responsible for the follow-up, for entering those leads in a CRM system. So they must take that lead and nurture it all the way through the sales funnel. But what we're not typically, hey, to those who just joined, we're just jumping in and talking about the community manager role and how to compensate that role. So I was just kind of diving in and saying that our community managers are generally responsible for pulling leads down through the funnel and making sure that they give an amazing tour, that they're setting tours up, that they're responding to emails really quickly, that they're following up with leads and following the system that we set for them. But generally what they're not doing is going out to networking events. They're probably not in charge of Facebook ads. They're probably not doing lead gen to get the leads in. So they are not hunters of leads. They are nurturers of leads. And then with all the other hats that they're wearing, they're also nurturers of our existing community and trying to retain members. Even totally sure that we should get to that point. I think what I like is having a compensation structure that rewards them for bringing in new members and retaining members, but without such a heavy focus on the sales aspect, because they have so many other hats they're wearing, unless you have an operations manager, unless you have, other folks that are taking care of some of the things that are under their, typical hat. If they really are focused on managing leads, then of course you want to compensate them in that way. I think I would look at, for those that are doing this, to make sure that their team is handling leads as efficiently as they can. I know this is definitely a big struggle in this role, right? An email comes in with an inquiry, but the community manager is handling a conference room, making coffee, working with a member, hosting a member event. They could be doing a host of other things. And if they're the only person on staff, then how are they going to get to that lead immediately, or make sure that phone gets answered every time, or make sure the follow-up emails are sent immediately after a tour? It can be really tricky. So I think instead of focusing on compensation, focus on supporting that community manager to make sure that they have the space and the priorities allocated and are able to kind of manage their calendar so that they can take care of these things, and certainly automating as much of this as you can. So do you have automation emails that are set up for tour follow-ups? Inbound, leads should be automated as much as possible. People should be able to book tours directly on the website, which should kick into a confirmation email, which should kick into a calendar invite. So all those things so that your community manager doesn't have to manage that. But I would be careful about compensating from a bonus structure or an incentive structure, commission structure, a role that is not really a hunter but a nurturer. Certainly if you want to make sure that their incentives are aligned and focused on that, then make it a component, but I wouldn't weight it too heavily. I think what you want to do is hire the person who's going to do an amazing job regardless. This is what I find. Again, the profile of a hunter is very different, and they're very focused on the numbers, and commissions and those kinds of things really fire those people up. But generally for our community managers, we want to find someone who's really happy in that role, who's a great fit. And I use a tool. I just taught this in the Community Manager University program. It's called the PI Behavioral Assessment Tool, Predictive Index. And, I've found some correlation among certain behaviors in the community manager role. And it's more nurturing than hunter. And they tend to really be a great fit for the role and love the role when they're kind of lined up, when their behaviors lined up with the things that are required in the role, and they'll do a great job. Now, if you're in a market where it's really hard to find good community managers, and I've been in this position in the Bay Area, it can be very hard to attract really great talent to a small company, then you may be running into a problem where you're just not getting amazing people and you feel like you have to compensate in order to really motivate them to do the job right. And that's tricky because at that point, I'm not sure the commission's going to do it. You might just not have the right person in the seat. Anyway, I know folks have good results with doing bonuses and commissions. And as I said, we do a layer of that. But it's not the compensation. We have a base salary with benefits, and the bonus is more of a thank you for the things that you've done in your role to bring in new members and to retain members. So just a couple of thoughts on that. Really curious on additional discussion for those that have had some great results with the commission structure.